Hello, hello. Welcome to Ram and Goat. And this week we are doing the Rambling Ram. I'm Laura Lee, and I'm not rambling alone today. I am rambling with our friend Mary Louise. Hi, Mary.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me today. This was kind of a spontaneous thing we decided to do, so I'm excited. All right. I've been really getting into the woo and the spiritual and the vibrational stuff and the frequency shifting and all of that. And I watched / listened to a podcast yesterday, a Joe Rogan episode with Billy Carson. And I went down the rabbit hole and I was like, I want to explore this even more, but bring the astrology in. And then your name came up and I was like, we gotta talk. We gotta go into this because I know this is something you definitely can go deep into. One of the things that really came about during this podcast episode, I'll have to pull up what number it was, what episode it was, but it was one of the most recent Joe Rogan episodes. But Billy Carson is a really interesting guy. Had you seen him before or did you know about him?
I did not know about him until this podcast. Yeah.
Okay. So I pulled him up in his birth chart and everything, but he has a his own like channel, his own streaming service called Forbidden Knowledge and with the number 4. And he is, I mean, that alone just interests me. Like what kind of woo are you that you created your own streaming service with
Right.
all of the woo, right? It's like, wow. But what I loved about Billy Carson, and I've seen him before on some of the Gaia TV streaming stuff, and I've seen him in quite a few of the different episodes and series and stuff they have on Gaia TV. And if you guys don't know, Gaia is a streaming service for like metaphysical, spiritual, health oriented. It's like Netflix and all of the streaming platforms. And so Billy Carson was on Joe Rogan and they were talking about, oh my gosh, everything, right? Like, how many subjects do you think they covered in that episode?
I don't know. I lost track. After a while, I was like, how did we get here? Like they were all over the place.
Which I loved. My brain got more
Yeah.
like it just so stimulated watching and listening to this. So as an astrologer, I of course had to go and like pull up the astrology of these guys and dive in and see what was going on. And even with Joe Rogan, I was like, this is so intriguing. So he is born August 11th, 1967. So I always think of the 60s babies as these revolutionary babies, right? The souls that decided to incarnate in the 60s, I feel like you guys are special souls. Like you were like, look at that shit show. Let's go in. Ready? Let's dive in. Right? It's so intriguing the way that now is manifesting X number of years later. So when I was looking at his chart, he is a solid Taurus rising, which is nice and stable and steady of like how they show up. They're not really changeable in that department. But then he's got his sun conjunct Jupiter, so big and expansive energy in Leo. And I was like, oh yes, of course you're here to be big and bold and brave and have a giant, a giant platform and things to say, bravely saying things. And then he's got his Saturn, which is his karmic mission, his karmic lesson in the 11th house of forming a community and being unique and rebellious. And it's in Aries. He's going to be a leader in being a weirdo and he's going to work hard doing it. And I was like, yes, Joe Rogan, doing your birth chart. Yes. Thank you so much. And bringing us all of the controversial subjects. Like that is literally his karma. He came here to do is work hard and be mature and be the leader in bringing these controversial subjects into the masses. Yes.
Yeah. You know what I was thinking when I was listening to it this morning, I was like, man, I love that these guys are having these conversations in public forums.
Yes.
And it's not it's I guess in some areas it's considered still weird or woo, but it's becoming more normalized the more we have these conversations, and that is exciting to me. I love it.
So exciting. And I think that's why I felt really compelled to dive into this today, because I'm seeing these conversations quite a bit more and more with women. I'm not seeing them as much with men. Yeah. And I love that this was on this platform, this giant platform that Joe Rogan has built, and that they did dive into all of these concepts of, hey, what if we took care of our people? And what if we actually gave everybody power? What if everyone had power and internet as a human right? What if that was just a payment we eliminated from everybody, and it just like was merged into society as like this thing we cared for them? And what if we provided them with a living wage, right? You know, they really explored the concept of AI taking technology and running with it, and then really diving into doing society in a different way. And that's what I loved. Basically, the whole, if you could really summarize up this, what was it, like 2 hour podcast?
Yeah, this was a long podcast.
Yeah. If you could summarize it, I think they really were discussing overall rebuilding society. That's what it felt like, right? It was this
I would that, yeah.
energetic shift into, well, what if we viewed society from this perspective instead of this perspective, right? So
bringing in a lot of awareness, knowledge that has been covered up by the mass.
100%. And now we are finally utilizing this platform of the internet to bridge these gaps and to bring this awareness in and enlighten, quote unquote, enlighten the people, right? Remind them that they're not here to be slaves to the system. They're here to live their gift.
Right.
And that's some of the role I play with helping them understand their unique musical / energetic composition that the stars gave them. That's a role you play as a energy worker and helping them with their karmic mission and their questions and guiding them through the fog. And if we all did our own unique composition, we would actually be really good society. It would work well. But it's the power and control and the manipulation and the suppression. And now finally you can only suppress things for so long. Have you ever used a pressure cooker? You can only pressurize for so long before it, right? It starts to steam and jitter and shake. And society is at this pressure point now where the last time Pluto was in Aquarius was when, again, society had this pressure cooker situation. And we were like, screw you to the British. And we came over to America and colonized and settled it and really took over. And that in turn really shifted and changed the indigenous people that were here, right? They got shaken up and altered as well, unintentionally. And it was just this massive shift in all of society, not just the American colonies, but all of the world. The French felt it. I know there's a bunch of stuff happening in China and Japan. Taiwan was having a bunch of stuff. Like if you look back in history, the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, it was really shaking up the foundations of society. So Pluto in Aquarius is fascinating to me, but then we've got some other energy coming up. And before I dive into that, I want to get your feel on, or your take on what you're feeling with things shaking up. Because you and I don't live in the same region. You're in Texas and I'm in Wisconsin.
Right.
Do you feel this down where you are? Do you feel this in your society, like a shakeup and an undercurrent of change happening?
I feel where I am, we're very sheltered. I don't know why, but when things are happening in the outside world, if you will, I feel like we're in a little bubble here and like things just keep magically moving the way they always have. And nothing really comes and affects us much.
Interesting.
So it's interesting. I can observe it in the world around me, but it's not happening here.
Do you feel like that will maintain for very long? Or do you feel like something's going to suddenly shift your area?
I'm hearing the word safe haven.
Interesting.
Wimberley, the town that I live in, is very energetically aligned with the pyramids. It's aligned on the ley lines. We have a vortex here, and people come here and they either love it or they hate it. There's no in between. And if they love it, they come and they stay for life. Like it's this whole thing.
Yeah, it pulls them in.
And so, yeah, which is interesting because I feel like it's starting to kick me out. What does that say?
Isn't that, well,
No.
Let's think about that, right? Knowing that there's shifting, knowing that the energetics are really changing right now in a profound way. And then what you're saying, right? It either pulls you in or kicks you out.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I think that people come here because it is a safe space. And they feel comfortable here to just kind of be themselves and be able to relax
Yeah.
for a moment in time, if you will, because it's not being affected as much by the outside world.
So it's a 3D rest spot. Okay. We're going to go to Wimberley, Texas, and we're going to just rest from the 3D experience. But here's the thing. The 3D experience, for the most part, is really shifting. It really is. So I have been hearing for years now, as I've kind of created awareness around spiritual stuff and all that, I've been hearing this concept of the earth is changing frequency, right? The vibration is changing. How would do you have an analogy to give people for like how they understand what that means in like this 3D experience?
Okay. What I'm being shown right now, it's like taking a jar and it has a layer of sand and it has a layer of glitter. And it's in water. And you take it, you put the lid on it, you shake the shit out of it, and that the sand is going to go right back down to where it was, but that glitter is going to be all over the place. All that magic and beauty, that it's going to be there. That's what they're showing me.
Oh, I love that visual. Okay. Because I know when I first heard this, I think I was reading a Dolores Cannon book, and she was really diving into this concept about the new earth and the shifting vibrational frequency, and that it's happening right now and we just are in it. That's just what's going on. And the way she described it made it feel kind of peaceful for me. Like it wasn't going to be this jarring transition or anything. Like I was just going to teleport out of my body like Star Trek, right? But they did talk about teleportation, and which I found fascinating in the podcast as well. We'll have to dive into that. So one of the things I'm really curious about is this vibrational shift, because I feel like I'm feeling it. I feel like other people are feeling it, but we don't quite have the language in this realm to really explain it well. And I know that sounds lame. But when I really try to wrap my head around like what does this mean? It means we are expanding, right? Everything's energy and we're expanding our connection, similar to when we were able to connect with the internet. You and I grew up in a time where the internet wasn't a thing. And now we are recording live, chatting with each other, looking at each other, and we're not connected to any, like, yes, some cords, but really we could be, totally hands free and be doing that. That's magical, and was not like a career option when I was graduating high school. You know, so to me, that is a vibrational frequency shift, right? Like this completely new thing that didn't exist and now it does. So in my 3D understanding, in my little humanoid brain, I'm seeing it happening in ways like that, where we have these new technologies that, I don't know, make our world feel faster, feel more connected, feel more like we're all in this together, right? We're all feeling things together. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. Totally. And that's something that I was going to say too about the frequency shift, is that we're with that, even if we're not conscious of it, as our vibration rises, where it's opening up all of this here so that we can have that not just 3D, 4D, 5D perception, so that we can experience our world around us in a much different way. We're much more connected to everything around us. So it's not just like, oh, there's a tree outside my window, it's a pretty tree, I like look at. No, it's, I have more intimate connection with it, in the sense that I understand that it's a living, breathing creature, that there's an energy exchange between me and all of nature out there. They're putting off things that I can breathe, I'm putting off things they can breathe, whatever. But when our vibration raises, we're much more aware of that, and we've become much more in tuned with our actions, our daily actions, how we not only treat the planet, but how we treat each other. And like the sand in that visual I just gave earlier, if you are refusing to quote unquote change your ways, you're just gonna sink to the bottom of that jar.
Yeah.
While the rest of us are just floating around shining our light.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's such a great analogy. I love that. And I think that's kind of how Dolores Cannon tried to explain it. But I think your analogy gives it a really good visual where the people who are not vibrating at the other frequency, the leveling up frequency, the going up an octave, I guess if you want to use musical terms, they'll just be that sand sitting down in the bottom of the jar. Not a bad thing. There's not good, wrong, bad, anything. It just is. That's what they are. When I was listening to this podcast with Billy Carson and Joe Rogan, they were talking about teleportation being like an actual thing. Do you have thoughts on this? I'm so curious about your thoughts and ideas on this.
I feel like, of course, yes, it's possible. I think we're a long way off from it. We're so stuck in the density of our bodies.
Yeah.
Um,
He was describing it. Billy Carson was describing it as like a DNA hard drive. So I have my computer all hooked up to a separate hard drive, and I have all my stuff on there. And if I just unplug that, bring it in the house, and plug it into a different computer, ta-da! All of my stuff is there. And that was really the description he gave that my brain really like understood. I understood that concept. And then when he said it would be really similar to Star Trek, where like the body and the molecules would just kind of evaporate, go into this DNA hard drive, and then they would just re-evaporate. Sure, that sounds good. And but he did say that it would be a death. Every time you would teleport, it would be an initial death and then a rebirth. And I'm listening to this going, damn, that sounds a lot like Pluto energy here. in the weirdo sign of Aquarius, talking about all the technology and all the weird stuff from alien realms. I was like, man, I gotta look up Billy Carson's chart, right? So I looked up his chart because that's what I do. So Billy Carson has, first of all, I knew this man had Virgo. I was like, he's got to have this Virgo energy. His mind had these details. You see how he delivered his information? It was certain. Like it didn't matter what woo weird crap he was talking about. He was confident with this stuff. He was very assertive, and like you weren't going to question that. You were, yes, sir, that's correct. Uh-huh. What right? He was so set with his details. And every time Joe would ask him a question, he'd have an answer and another layer and all of this factual stuff to back it up. And I was like, man, this man has to have Virgo. So I looked him up. Sure enough, you guys, he's a Virgo sun, conjunct a Virgo Venus, and a Virgo Pluto. I was like, that makes so much sense. His values are knowing those details and then relating those details to others, really sharing that information that he has. That's a huge part of him. What I love though is he's got a 27-degree Mercury in Leo. So he's speaking confidently. And with all that detail of Virgo behind him, with this confident, brave Leo boldness, I feel like I want someone to go up to him and be like, I'm going to question you. I want answers. I want the details. And he'd be like, all right. And he'll give you like a PhD thesis here. Like this guy's got info. I mean, let's face it, he has his own streaming station. My favorite part was that he has Mars in Aquarius. Yes, he is driven to be unique, rebellious weirdo. And it's right next to his North Node, 2 degrees away, which is his soul's calling. His soul's destination is to share with humanity all the crazy, weird, alien, unique ways of thinking. And he's really driven to do it. I was like, yes, please. Yes, Billy Carson. Thank you for doing what you're here to do, man. Yes. And boy, did he delivered for 2.5 hours on all of the strange. So one of the things that's coming up right now when I was watching that is that we are in a very Gemini energy right now. And this is where we are learning to expand and get new ways of thinking from the learned one over here and the learned one over here. Jupiter and Gemini is very like, I want to expand and get new perspectives. Man, wasn't that podcast a different perspective? Like for real?
Yeah, 100 different perspectives versus going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. What was the thing that caught you the most? I'm so curious.
that caught me the most. I don't know that if it was anything one topic specific, but like I said earlier, I love that this is coming into the open, but I love and fascinates me that men are talking about this,
Yes.
because it opens up a new level of vulnerability, which I think is so important for the masculine energy right now. They
Yes.
need that. So I felt like, and these two, well, at least Joe Rogan is very influential in the masculine realm. The fact that he's opening up and talking to other men about these things is just like, I'm like, oh my God, so many people are going to get this information that never would have from any other source. So I
Exactly.
find it amazing and fascinating, and I'm yes, let's do this.
And I think it is a big deal that we are starting to see that vulnerability, the vulnerability that maybe we do need to humble ourselves, and maybe we do need to surrender into a more balanced energy, and less power and control, right? And more harmony and compassion. Whoa, what a concept. What would that do to our society if we had more balance with the compassion versus the power in our governments and in our leadership? What would it do if we had equal women versus men in Congress and in governmental positions? What would it do if we took care of our people on a core basis, and everybody had a livable wage, and everybody had power taken care of? Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And these are the concepts that they brought forward, and then threw a whole bunch of woo in there too. I love that. So Uranus is the planet that is probably my most favorite, and Helena and I have been talking about Uranus forever, and we just opened our Patreon account with a whole Uranus class, and I love it because it's the planet that shakes us up. And woo, I was feeling shaken up this morning. I was telling you before we recorded, the planet Mercury is on top of my moon in Gemini, exactly opposite the planet Uranus, which is chaos, nervous system, sudden change. And that is in my 6th house of daily routines, being of service, and tending to your home, having things nice and organized. Like, I really do want a nice, organized house. It's a thing. But I live with 5 kids. And boy, was my Uranus shaken up today when Mercury was like, hey, we are going to speak how we feel about being stressed. And it came out like a firework. And it was really intense. And that is just one example of how this planet can affect us. So, as a society, we have been dealing with Uranus in Taurus since 2018. And now in 2026, so we're getting close to moving out of it. In 2026, we're going to move into Gemini. And with Gemini, Uranus, and Pluto, Aquarius, we now have air sign and air sign, and shaking things up in the way we communicate, in the way we understand, in the way we do community, in the way we interact with people. And I'm kind of excited about this because I feel like we need a good shakeup with how we network and connect, right? Do you have any feelings on the next few years with society's changes? You get any like spiritual downloads or anything with that?
It's something I've been saying for a while, is that when we get to the point that we're at today, where the system is so broken, it has to crumble in order to rebuild something more stable. It's like the tower card, right?
Yeah.
If that's not built on stable ground, it's going to fall. And that's what I've been feeling, I think, the last few years. Yeah, I noticed all of this starting to come about with the whole COVID thing, because there was a big installation of fear around that, but it was creating a bigger awareness. People started to question the authority at that point. And it just feels like since then, people have really started to open up. I mean, that's when these subjects and these ideas started becoming more mainstream almost, because it's like people had all this time on their hands now, and they weren't being mandated by whoever at work or whoever, whatever. And so they were free to go and do what they wanted to do. And they started researching and looking at things from a different perspective and creating this whole new mindset and ideas. The idea that, I think I said this earlier about the tower card,
Mm-hmm.
that this is all of this power society is built on sand.
Yeah.
And it's gonna have to crumble because the people aren't putting up with the bullshit anymore.
Yeah.
We're done. And
Exactly.
so even though there's fear around the unknown, we're gonna look back someday and be like, oh my God, why didn't we do this so much sooner?
Exactly. Because this society and the way it's built is the only thing we've known, we think that that's the only thing there is. In
Right.
reality, there's infinite numbers of possibilities to build a society around, right? The indigenous people and other tribes in, many, many other countries have very different societal systems, very different governmental situations, very different ways of doing business without money, right? There is things you can do, there's ways you can live that don't actually have to have power and control, right? I
Right.
just read an article, or it was like one of those it wasn't a full article, but it was one of those like big blog posts about a specific tribe in Africa, and that the child's, I want to get this right. So the child's conception or belief of when they come into existence is when the mother decides to have the baby. And so she goes and sits alone under a tree until she receives the child's song. And so she'll get this child's song, she'll learn the song, and then she goes back and teaches it to the man that will be the child's father. And then they sing the child's song into until the child's into existence physically. And then when the baby's born, the town or the village all sings the song to the baby, and they continue to do that as the baby grows. If it falls and skins its knee, whoever's there will pick it up and sing that child's specific song. And I was reading this like, oh my gosh, this resonates so much with me with astrology, how I keep telling people that they have their unique song. And as the child grows and ages, the only other time they sing the song is at the death of the person. But uh, in their life, if they do something that is deemed, cruel or unjust or bad or whatever, instead of putting them on trial or anything like that, they put them in the middle of the village, in the middle of the circle. They all gather around and they sing that person's song to them to remind them how much they are loved, how unique they are, how special they are. And I mean, like, reading this was just moving my heart, going,
Yeah.
look, a different way of being. And it exists currently in our reality. What a concept to just shift our perspective a little bit. Now, the podcast, if you guys listen to the Joe Rogan, Billy Carson podcast, it's going to shift your perspective a lot a bit. It was a big one for sure. But I think that's what's happening here is we're having this consciousness awareness. And like you said, when COVID happened, Saturn, the planet of time to learn and be mature and recognize that we have work to do, he moved into Aquarius right as COVID hit, literally right then. And we were all like forced and restricted. But then during the restriction, it happens because we need to learn something, right? There is a reason we're restricted. So we were all restricted and we learned a bunch. One of the things was that, look, society actually healed itself really fast, right? Nature grew really quickly. There was deer in the streets. People were like observing nature. Families were playing with each other again, right? Like parents were doing, oh my gosh, some of the reels that came out of that time and some of the videos and stuff. Do you remember that? How crazy some of the people were with creating Disney sing-alongs. The dad would dress up. Oh my, it was ridiculous. People got creative. They stepped into their unique authority and identity. And we all use the internet a lot more, a lot more. I know some people who had like DJ dance parties every Saturday night on Zoom. They were they were using the internet in a whole new way to connect. And I think that's the thing that the people in power who want the power and control and want to keep the suppression, they don't want that. They don't want the connections and they don't want the growth and the, understanding that we are all here to get along. So I think that was a really great time for us to really see the maturity of how we can still connect and connect even more so, even though we were restricted to being home. And there was a real big maturity that happened during that time. And I think that was like the kickoff, right? That was kind of the launch into this awareness. Like you said, they had more time. They had more time to learn, which is such an Aquarius thing. I want to learn. I want more information. I need to be smart. and people learned. And now we have streaming services called Forbidden Knowledge and Gaia TV and all of these that are trying to bring information to you to let you know, hey, you're stuck in the matrix. Get out. Take the red pill or the blue. What color pill was it? I don't remember. Whichever, take the pill that gets you out of the matrix, right? And I feel like we're all trying to wake up to this, but some of us are ready and some of us aren't. And that's tricky when the ones that aren't are maybe family members or loved ones. So how do you handle that? What's your advice for that when you've got, let's say your spouse or your mom or your kid or somebody's just not growing and waking up with you? What would you say to them?
I have a mother who is very steeped in religion, who doesn't understand me. And she says that out loud. I don't understand you. Well, that's okay. You don't have to.
Right.
You just love them where they are. That's all I can say about that. You love them where they are, because that's where the compassion comes in. And knowing that we're all connected, knowing that she has her own path that her soul chose in this lifetime, and whatever that is, I don't know, and I can't judge that. And so if I were to, and this is my former self, I'm gonna make you change your mind, that's not my business.
No,
it's not my business to change her karma or interfere with whatever it is that her soul chose to do. So it's easy to say that for a parent or a sibling, somebody who it's easy to love from a distance, right? A spouse or a partner or anything like that definitely proves to be more difficult currently, because it's hard to find somebody on the same level of understanding who accepts me having this level of understanding.
Yeah.
And to change me to their way of thinking. I don't necessarily, I think you, Laura, probably could have more insight to that than I do, because you've had a long relationship with somebody who understands you and accepts you the way you are. So
I just actually, Philip and I were talking about this yesterday, because the kids were at respective places and big kids were at the library, and we had a couple hours to ourselves, and he was doing his bakeries, baking stuff, and I had the laptop and I was working in the house. And when I came home from dropping off the kids and I came home, he had Gaia TV on, the Joe Rogan podcast on. He was watching this. I got so turned on. I was like, you are so sexy that you're like listening to all the weird shit. Like I just got so excited about the fact that like I don't push him. He does this on his own. Like there's a weirdness in there that he has naturally, and I so appreciate it. I so appreciate the growth that him and I have done together, because this wasn't us when we were 16 and 17. No.
Right.
We have grown together, and we've grown into the open, crazy, spiritual weirdos. And I'm so grateful that this growth has happened together. But man, I was really excited when I was like, oh, what are we watching? This is fun. And it just gets me excited when somebody wants to explore weird shit that is uncomfortable or a little bit, untraditional to talk about. So what's your favorite subject to dive into in this category of woo? What's your favorite thing?
My favorite thing, I think, it's just kind of like a big umbrella of just awareness, because there's so many perspectives. And how can we be so arrogant to think that one perspective is all that there is? Like,
right.
Part of what they were talking about in the podcast was alien life form and that kind of thing. And I've said my entire life, how stupid are we as humans to think that we're it? We are
ignorant.
We are a speck in the multiverse of many, many universes. Like, really? We're it? No, I don't think so. We're not that special.
It feels like if we have on our property of 35 acres, we have a ton of really big anthills, like really big. I'm talking like 5 feet by 10 feet. Like they're gigantic. and they're probably about 2 feet off the ground. They're just this enormous colony, right? We leave them alone, and the deer will sleep by them in winter because they're warm, and bunnies will make their little nest by them. So they're very useful. And a lot of times we'll just cut around them, the trail around them, and just observe them while we're walking. And sometimes when I walk by, I'll just stand there and look at these ants. And I'm talking, there's millions of ants in this giant thing, right? And then I look over 10 feet away, and there's another one of these giant hills. And I picture myself as this like alien life form, advanced technology and all this, and I'm coming down above these little ants and their planet, right? And I try to picture myself as this little ant on Earth, right? And then there's alien life forms like coming down and looking at us on Earth, like, oh, aren't they cute? Right? Just like we do to these ant hills, like, oh, aren't they cute? Look at them doing their little stuff. And I try to put myself in that perspective a little bit more, and stay humbled that I'm just a little cell in this whole breathing, moving, living planet. I'm just one cell.
Yeah. So one thing that always comes to mind anytime this subject comes up is the movie Men in Black. And at the very end of the whole time, they're looking for Orion's belt, right? And at the very end, they finally find it. It looks like a marble that's on the cat's collar. But inside this little tiny marble is a whole universe.
Whole universe.
And they say, stupid humans, when are you going to figure out that size is not relative? And I've thought about that my whole life. Like that movie in high school. And I've just been like, God, that is so true. But that's what I'm talking about, broadening your perspective to the idea that what we can tangibly, physically see is not all there is.
No. In fact, that's exactly what Jupiter and Gemini is wanting us to do. The biggest planet, huge gas giant that basically protects us, right? Because of Jupiter, we can actually exist on Earth without getting smacked by asteroids and shit all the time, right? If Jupiter wasn't there to like be the massive gravity force that pulls them in, we would be riddled with crap constantly. So I'm always very thankful for this benevolent planet, right? It's really blessing that it's there to take the hits and just kind of keep on going. And it doesn't mind at all. It's like a mosquito, right? Just get away. So when we think about Jupiter moving into this energy of Gemini, Gemini wants multiple perspectives. It's duality in and of itself. It is light and it is dark, right? And they talked a lot about that too, where you there is no light without dark. There is no existence without death. There's no life without death, right? There has to be this duality. And we have to zoom out of the picture and see that there is white and black, and there's the yin yang together. And you can't live in one existence or the other. You have to view both. And that's the perspective that Jupiter is going, hey, you need to see multiple perspectives, please. It's really, really important. You must learn what you're doing now and that there are other choices. There's other ways of doing stuff. So I'm really, really curious with your energy and the things that you can feel. What's your take on just in general across the board with AI? I know how I feel about it. I use it. I use it quite readily with some of the stuff I do with my business. But what do you feel about AI?
It's interesting because I've never had a real strong connection with technology in general.
Okay.
I think in this lifetime, for whatever reason, it's just not my mode of transportation, if you will. So I'm observing all of this AI stuff coming around, and I think it's interesting. I think it's cool, but I don't know how I feel about it yet. I haven't observed enough to make a lucid decision.
I think that's where I'm at, right? I'm using it. I'm using it cautiously. I feel like I'm using it responsibly. And I know that that's a slippery slope, and I see where this can go. I see it. And I'm kind of like, well, maybe they could get to a point where this is doing my laundry for me or doing the dishes. I don't know, right? I bet at some point somebody was irritated with electricity or, thought that was going to be the devil or what, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Prior to what becomes normal, it always kind of feels a little scary or a little bit apprehensive, right? Now the internet is just a thing, right? I was very resistant to these devices. This whole smartphone thing, ooh, I did not want nothing to do with that. I wanted my phone that flipped up and had the buttons you could push. And I just wanted to make phone calls. That was
Yeah.
me, right? I was a phone call girl. And now the phone rings and I was like, ah, what do I answer it? What do I do? So it is going to take some adjustment, I think, in general. But once people realize we've been living with AI for a while, that's what Google and Alexa and Siri, that's what all of them are. They've
Right.
been around. We're just now seeing it kind of everywhere, right? In all of the programs and all of the everythings. I think about my son who is 13 months old, and I think about his life and what his life is going to be like with technology. And I can't wrap my head around it, right? I don't have an idea of how this is going to develop, but I do know it is part of him, right? It is part of his existence. I'm so curious about these little new babies coming in. So curious. What else you want to dive into?
It feels like there's just, and you and I talked about this the other day, like big change on the horizon, not just for me and you, but I think just for everybody. Like there's just big change happening. But the message is like, it's all good stuff. It's going to be good. It all feels positive, and, you know, we just have to wrap our minds around the idea that, like you said earlier, what we've always known is not all there is.
Right.
So,
Message of
like,
hope.
it's not going to be as bad as we're making it out to be.
No, because that's the power and control is the fear, right? The fear. And I totally understand the fear right now. And there is manipulation with the people in power. There is scare tactics and fear tactics. It's what they've been trying to do for a while, right? Many, 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 many years. For much of human existence has been that. But the internet I have seen, because I've seen it grow up with me, really, the internet I've seen create such deep and important connections among people that would have never met before. And it's creating these connections that fuel a sense of security and a sense of identification and like finding other weirdos, right? Like the fact that we can just sit and talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm in my little Christian filled area and you're in your little Christian filled area, and we can be weirdos kind of up above and still do the connections. And I've seen this with the internet, and I think that's where the true greatness, the true, I don't know, the growth, the love, the compassion that is in the technology is in the bringing the people together. That the understanding, how many people have found their spouses or their life partners or their besties through the internet. I know I've met amazing, amazing humans because of this crazy technology. And those amazing humans have just fueled my own drive and my own, I think, mission in life to do, fulfill my own purpose. And that in turn has fueled them to do theirs. And it's just this feedback loop of growth and spiritual evolution. And I think that's what's happening more than anything is this feedback loop of like, oh, and then this person tells this person, and then this person tells this person, and it's that
Right.
you
I
know
mean,
that
it is now for me to give clients a web address or even just a name and say, go Google this person. Like I wrote down, I had a client this morning, and as we're talking, she's like, oh, can you write that down for me? Can you write that down for me? So I wrote down 3 different things on this piece of paper that she can go and run with, you know, back before all this technology. Like, what are you gonna, let me go to the library and see if they might or might not have a book about this. Like, no.
yeah, it was
So
so much slower, so much more tedious, so much more difficult and cumbersome to find those connections. And then you had to have a physical meetup. And now it's fine. You can still have those physical meetups, but they're almost like, in addition to. And with these online spaces, there's really an amazing connection where there can be some deep, deep vulnerability and deep growth. And I know you and I have seen it with when we were writing our book together, and the growth and support that happened when you bring 12 women together to each write a chapter in a book, right? Called Dare to Express. It's out on Amazon, guys. Go find it. But we have this connection, and because of the internet, we were able to come together and then write a physical thing that will live in time for all existence in reality, which is so trippy. It's so trippy that that's what this does, right? When I was thinking about all of this, I really do think it's magic. I think it's just, we watch a lot of shows on streaming services and stuff. A lot of them have magic. Some of the most popular shows involve some form of superpower or magic. And I think we discredit our own superpower of our ability to be changing and growing and evolving with the technology quite rapidly. I feel like humans are doing pretty darn good keeping up with this stuff. It's growing fast, and it's
like you said earlier about these babies coming in, they're not going to know any different. No. And so it's going to be so much better utilized for what they're going to do with it than us. We're still trying to figure it all out.
Right. We're like the old fogies trying to figure out, well, now where's the email button, right? Like it's crazy to watch a 13-month-old carry my phone to me. Like, we don't let him use it, but he carries my phone, and he knows that he can look at pictures and videos on there. Like, that's what he loves to do, is go look at pictures and videos. And he's now able to somehow communicate to me that that's what he wants to do. And I'm like, what the heck? And he knows how to, like, what FaceTime is. He understands he can talk to his grandmother that way, or some of my friends. I can't understand how his brain is wiring in that way versus right my brain in the 80s that clearly wired on Fruit Loops and She-Ra and He-Man and Fraggle Rock. And
I remember when they first invented a video phone, and the other person had to have the video phone too, so that you could communicate. And this was like in the probably early 90s, maybe, I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's so dumb. Like, who's gonna do that?
You? For a podcast in a couple years. That's awesome. I love it. I do think this next 20 years we're going to see a massive revolution in so many different ways. I don't think it's one revolution. I think we're going to be experiencing quite a few revolutions, but my prediction has been, for a while, I feel like there's a feminine revolution coming. I feel like that's the next, like, growth. It feels vulnerability wise and power wise and energetically wise. I just feel this, like, rising from, like, the sacral all the way up in the heart space, and, like, kind of emerging out the heart space. And it feels very, very feminine. And I just see it across, Instagram and TikTok. I see women in general just fed up with governmental decisions, fed up with just everything. Being paid less, being you name it, fed up. And I'm seeing it not just in America, right? I don't know if you follow other countries, but Iceland, the women there had a 1 or 2 day hiatus where they just all stopped. They just didn't go to work, shut the entire country down. They all went to a rally and they had a women's rights thing. South Korea, I read an article. They are boycotting men across the board. They're all stopping, like, making babies. They're stopping everything interaction totally with men. I was like, is this a thing? Is this a real article, or is this satire? Like, I want to do more research in this, but if it is real, that's kind of cool.
Well, we've been so out so long.
Yes.
Like you can't just live in one half of that. We have to have equal distribution of power. And it's been so masculine focused for so long that in order to bring it back in balance, there has to be this uprising of women. It has to.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see it in the Middle East with Taliban and suppressing women in Afghanistan and all that with their education again. And like when you give women, when women have freedom and then it's taken away, we don't play that game. That's not working. Mm-mm. And that's happening in so many areas of this world. It's not just here. It's all over. So I do see Pluto and Gemini in these air energies coming up in 2025, 2026 when Uranus moves there, and then Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini, and now Jupiter's there for the first time in 12 years since May of 2011. So like a lot of things have shifted since 2011, a lot. And we have a whole new realm. I don't know if you listen to Spotify. There is a whole new genre of music that didn't really exist before. That's like positive affirmations and women's empowerment and stuff, right? Like I listened to one called Mental Health. I'm going to give Moonlight Scorpio a shout out. If you haven't listened to the song Mental Health, it's like 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Listen to it. Phenomenal. This music didn't exist a couple years ago. Like this wasn't a genre. This wasn't a thing. Like what is happening? They're singing about abundance and good mental health, and they got spirit homies watching their back. And I was like, what? What? Wait, this is a thing? That stuff didn't exist. And suddenly now it does. And now my daughters are 10 and 12 listening to mama call in the abundance and the having, I got to love you from afar if you're refusing to evolve, right? Remember that you're greater than the problems that you solve, right? Like, just this empowerment and shit. I grew up with Tom Petty, Roxanne, and Sting, and it was just shit was not good music wise for us growing up. Not that it was bad, but it was a lot of like, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? Like,
go back and listen to a lot of that music, and it's hard for me to go back and watch a lot of shows that I watched growing up because again, going back to that perspective, I see it so differently now. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what programmed me my whole life.
Yep.
And this is bleh. So I love that this stuff is coming through right now for these younger generations, that they're getting that choice to hear something positive and not go shake your booty like
my milkshake brings all the boys to the yard. Damn right.
Yeah, like he gave it to me to go shake it for all you men. Thanks. No.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think one of the things we are seeing is this empowerment movement with women kind of filtering in subtle ways like that, right? Through the music, through the self-care, through the internet courses. Look at how many empowerment courses are out there now. Thanks to COVID and everybody having to put their shit online, women are like, all right, I'll teach the shit I know. Freaking cool, right? Yeah. I'm seeing so many women's speaking courses and writing courses and just all of this like, hey, share your story, publish what you've got to say, step up and speak, say your truth, step into vulnerability, right? So many new messages. I think Brene Brown was a huge pioneer with bringing shame out into the world and being like, hey, it's actually cool. We all feel this stupid emotion. Let's just talk about this shit, shall we? So many taboo subjects that our parents and our grandparents had to keep hidden due to the war and survival and all of that trauma. And now we're like, actually, I don't want to carry this garbage with me anymore. This is grandma's. I don't want this. Can we get rid of that, please? Right? We're doing the healing. We're recognizing that we don't need to just be in survival. We can actually move into thrival. Is thrival a word? Sure. So
it should be. Yes.
It is.
Add that to Webster's.
Absolutely. If bootylicious is a word, we're making thrival a word. All right. Yeah. And you see it with even things like Taylor Swift. That girl is single-handedly changing the world financially and representationally with she's paying people appropriately, paying the people who are on her tour, like she's giving them appropriate funds, and like it's whoa, what a concept. Take care of people? What? Actually care about them? Use your money for good? What? So I'm not a Swiftie, but I do admire how she handles this pressure and this fame that she's very much set up for. I've looked at her birth chart too, and she does well with it. She feels very humble and like she's got a good head on her shoulders, and she's using her influence well for, as far as what I can see, not being a Swiftie, right? But like just watching these women, these younger women coming up and giving a new narrative, I think is really big. And it's not necessarily on a spiritual, but it does start with that self-value. It does start with that empowerment. It does start with questioning society. It does start with, well, if I'm going to question that, what else should I question, right? And that starts to open us up to new ways of thinking. So I see it all over. And I also see the powers that be trying to hang on to power.
Oh, absolutely.
They hanging on
Yeah.
tight, real tight.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I know I talked to you about too, I'm feeling really called to, and when I feel called, when I say that, in reality, what that looks like is I'll be doing something, working at the computer, talking to my kids, doing something, and I'll get this push from behind me or a pull from within me to suddenly do something, right? Like write this down, or like a thought will drop into my head, and when I feel called to do something, that looks like this thought or this push or this pull, this energetic nudge shows up quite frequently. It'll show up randomly throughout the day 3 or 4 times. It'll show up the next day in a conversation. It just keeps showing up until I acknowledge it and go, oh, okay, I hear you. I gotcha. I'm going to do this. And usually that's talking to someone about it or writing it down. But lately, I know I was talking to you about it. I'm really feeling called to create a book program to write stories and invite other women or other people, not just women, but other people to write their story about their spiritual encounters, their spiritual quote unquote awakenings. You know, what stories do they have? What does that look like for them? Because I feel like if we read other people's stories in this 3D realm of what it looked like for them, how it showed up, what it heard, you know, what they heard, what it felt like, maybe something they saw in their head, and then how it played out in real life, right? Like what that actually looked like. I think if people see those stories and if they read them, they can then get a feel for, oh, that's how it could show up. Oh, okay, I had something similar like that. I didn't know what that was. Right? You can create this ping or this ding or this light bulb in other people. So I know I'm feeling called to do that and really facilitate these stories to come out of people. Is there anything that comes up for you around that? I know you and I were talking about like we both love to
So,
write.
of course, that was the thing that I was going to say, and then I forgot. But thank you for reminding me.
You're
because
welcome.
because you were talking earlier about being, the vulnerability and telling our stories and making it, normalizing it, and that kind of thing. And I'm like, that's what we did with Dare to Express.
Yeah.
I know myself personally, I told my deepest, darkest secret that most of my close friends didn't even know this part of my life existed. And it was fucking scary.
Yeah.
But it was also liberating because, oh my God, now I feel like I can just talk about it, and I don't have the resentment or the shame or the fear of judgment anymore because I've already said it. So if and I got so much positive feedback from my story in that book, and it exactly highlights what you just said, that we can put that out there and let people know that they're not alone, and they don't have to go through any of this by themselves, because there's a whole community of people out there who are experiencing something similar, regardless of what it looks like. And so it gives people an outlet, it gives them more places to plug into so that they can enhance their own experience.
Yes. And feel like they're not crazy. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much of this realm because it's the unseen, because it's not in our visual perspective, right? It's not in the light spectrum that we can see. but it's a feeling. It's very difficult to describe sometimes. It's very difficult to interpret sometimes, especially if you're new to it and you're not aware of what things mean, right? Or you don't have anyone to discuss it with or share it with. There is this kind of scariness and vulnerability there. And you might feel like you're a little bit weird. I know I thought I was schizophrenic for many years. Really just thought I was like avoiding the mental health hospitals, like just because I was cute and I could play it off. You know, I'm crazy, but I'm not that crazy, right? Like I really thought I had multiple personality disorder or whatever. I didn't understand that the words, the voices, the pictures I hear, or this I hear and see, is that's my intuition. That's spirit. That's how I get spoken to. And now that I've been able to tune in, get some guidance from you and from other guides, I now have a better grasp. I know what it feels like. I can give it language, and it feels like, oh, someone's coming through right now. Okay. And I know that I'm hearing a man's voice, and I'm not losing my mind, right? It's okay that I'm hearing a man's voice from outside of me. That's okay. I'm not actually schizophrenic or multiple personality. But that was so scary. It was scary. Yeah. It even feels scary now to sit and talk to you about this, knowing it's going to go out to the ethers and other people are going to hear me say that shit. Right. And I know it's my truth. And I know that by listening to that and tuning into that, I have changed people's lives for the positive in ways that I can't even describe right now. So I have to trust that, even if it's weird, even if I feel crazy.
All it took for me was somebody who I consider to be a mentor, who I had put, mediumship on a pedestal. And all it took for me was for her to say, you're a medium, right? And I'm like, no. And she's like, yes. And it was just that one little
click.
It got flipped. And I was like, oh, I can do this. Oh, cool. Okay. Let's go start playing,
For real. And then I did your chart and I was like, whoa, you're a medium. Holy man. Holy man. And you're like, yeah, I've been told that. Well, let me just confirm that shit for you because it is all over your chart. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love confirming that shit for people. It's so fun. Excellent. Well, if people do want to learn more, we've got the Cosmic Mama Collective. That's a membership space that I've got. And Mary Louise and I will be joining together once a month to teach a class called Support from the Stars. And this is just a gathering we're doing to basically talk about spiritual health and what this looks like and how can you get healthier in the spiritual realm. We know how to get healthy physically. We know how to eat better and work out. We know how to work on our emotions, go talk to a therapist and cry and do all the, what do we do for our spiritual health? Well, that's what we're going to describe and dive into and explore. So if you guys are interested in talking more with Mary and I, we will be doing that. So you can check us out with the Cosmic Mama Collective, all the links below. And then Mary, where can people find you and how can they hook up with you?
I'm on all the socials at Mary Louise Healing. That's MaryLouise Healing. My website is marylouise.org. And yeah, feel free to reach out. And I love answering questions and just meeting new people. So love to hear from you.
And if you are just getting into this, I'm going to give a shout out to our friend Amanda. I'm just going to say hi to Amanda. I know she'll probably listen to this. This is just Amanda's a perfect example. And she is just stepping into this awareness. And she was like, what do I do with this like thing that I have or this like intuition that I have? I was like, go talk to Mary. She's gonna give you some more guidance and get you kind of tuned in a little bit more, help you kind of get your understanding growing a little bit more. And so if there's people in your life or if you are having this like, I think I'm tuning in, I think I'm leveling up, I think I have these gifts I don't know what to do with, come and talk with us. We would love to help you out. This is something that we've kind of had to learn the hard way. And if you don't have to learn the hard way, it's nice. Reach out. Well, thank you for joining me today, Mary Louise. I'm so glad we got to sit and ramble together. It was so great to have you on. You have a lovely rest of your day. And thanks for listening, everybody. Take care. Hey, thanks for listening to The Rambling Ram. I'm so glad you tuned in. If you like this show, be sure to support us by buying us a coffee or tea. Financially, that helps us. And sharing us with a friend or family member who you think would like this. It means the world to us and really helps. Thanks so much.